I thought about the word normal a lot back then. It felt like the perfect, solid foundation for everything I had built. My name is Jake, and at 35, my life was a blueprint I had meticulously designed. A good job as an architect, a beautiful house in a quiet Chicago neighborhood, and Anna. My wife. She was the one who added color to the precise lines of my existence. We had our routines. Weekday mornings were a ballet of quiet efficiency. The soft hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of porcelain mugs, the low hum of the city waking up outside our window. I'd kiss her goodbye before the sun was fully up, a quick press of my lips to her cheek that was as familiar as the cool breeze off Lake Michigan. I would spend my days in a world of steel and glass, dreaming up structures that would stand for decades. I believed in permanence. I believed in us. But in the past few months, the routine had begun to fray at the edges, like a worn thread on an old jacket. I first noticed it in the silence. Anna, a woman who once filled our home with the chaotic beauty of her art and the sound of her laughter, now moved through the rooms with a quiet, almost furtive grace. She was a painter, and her studio in the back of the house was her sanctuary. The sense of turpentine and oil paints used to be a constant presence, a sign of her creative life. Now, they were often replaced by a clean, sterile air, as if she hadn't been there for days. The real shift began with her phone. It was a simple, black slab of technology that had become an extension of her hand. Where it used to sit forgotten on the counter, it now disappeared with her into the studio, into the bathroom, even to the mailbox. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of the screen lighting up late at night. I'd ask, "Who is it?" and she'd smile vaguely and say, "Oh, just a work thing." But her eyes would not meet mine. One rainy Tuesday, I got home early, my project meeting cancelled. The Chicago sky was a bruised purple, and the rain fell in a steady, drumming rhythm against the windows. I found Anna in the kitchen, lost in a quiet intensity, staring at her phone. She didn't hear me come in. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. Her face, illuminated by the cold light of the screen, was a mask I didn't recognize. There was a look of complete, unadulterated focus. When she finally looked up and saw me, her expression changed instantly. A quick, practiced smile replaced the solemnity, but it felt hollow. "Jake. You're home early," she said, her voice a little too bright. She quickly slid the phone into her back pocket, a motion so swift it was almost a reflex. Meeting was cancelled. "Just felt like coming home to my wife," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She laughed, a thin, papery sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, here I am." I wanted to ask her what she was looking at. I wanted to ask her why she was so different. But the words felt heavy, like stones I couldn't lift. Instead, I just leaned over and kissed her forehead, the way I always had. It was a ghost of a gesture, a memory of our closeness. She didn't kiss me back. She just stood there, her hands in the pockets of her jeans, the outline of her phone a small, jagged shape against her thigh. That night, I lay awake long after she had fallen asleep, listening to the gentle rhythm of the rain and the silence of the house. The city outside, with its millions of lights and millions of secrets, seemed to be whispering. And for the first time in my life, my perfect blueprint felt less like a plan and more like a crumbling facade. I woke up the next morning feeling like a stranger in my own home. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a flat, unbroken gray, mirroring the landscape of my mind. Anna was already awake. She was humming softly, making breakfast, and for a fleeting second, the old normalcy flickered back to life. Then I saw her phone on the kitchen counter, screen down. A small, irrational wave of relief washed over me. It was in the open. A sign of trust. "Morning," she said, without turning around. Her voice was too cheerful. A performance. "Morning, Anna." I watched her from the doorway, trying to see the woman I knew. The one who would spontaneously dance to old records, who would leave tiny paint smudges on my favorite shirts, who looked at me with an openness that made me feel completely seen. That woman felt distant now, replaced by this polite, guarded version. The first tangible clue came later that day. It was mundane, almost laughably so. I was looking for a pair of scissors to open a package and, in my haste, I rummaged through the small junk drawer in the kitchen. Tucked behind a handful of rubber bands and a takeout menu from a place we never went to, I found a small, crumpled piece of paper. It wasn't a note or a receipt, just a slip of paper with a phone number scribbled on it. No name. Just a series of digits. I knew it wasn't mine. I knew it wasn't hers, not the way she wrote numbers, not with that heavy, deliberate stroke. I stared at it for a long time. It was nothing. It could have been anything. A number for a handyman, a note from a friend. But in the context of the coldness that had crept into our lives, it felt like an artifact from a different world. A world she was inhabiting without me. My heart started to beat a little faster, a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt a pang of guilt for even holding it. I quickly put it back, trying to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. The next moment came a few days later. Anna had an art show she was attending. She told me it was a networking event for local artists. She was dressed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not for me, not for a dinner out. Her black dress was sleek and fitted, her hair styled with an effortless elegance. She looked beautiful. She looked ready. "You look amazing," I said, a genuine compliment. "Thank you, Jake. I won't be too late." She left, and I sat on the couch, trying to read. But the words on the page were a blur. The silence of the house felt deafening. I imagined her there, among the paintings and the other artists, but my mind kept conjuring another image, her, laughing with someone I didn't know, her hand on their arm, the intimacy of it a physical pain in my chest. When she got home, it was almost 1 a.m. She was quiet as she came in, but a subtle scent clung to her, not her perfume, but something else, a different cologne, a faint, unfamiliar scent of a stranger. She didn't smell like herself. And in that moment, the crumpled paper, the late-night calls, the distance between us, it all clicked into a clear, terrifying picture. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, a premonition that something I had treasured as a given was about to become a loss. I came home early again on Friday. The week had been an endless, monotonous loop of watching Anna, of analyzing her words and her silences. The flimsy evidence I had gathered, a crumpled paper, a strange scent, had festered in my mind, turning into a bitter, undeniable certainty. The silence in the house, once a comfort, now felt like an accomplice to her lies. She was in the kitchen, making tea. The steam curled up from her mug, a soft, inviting spiral, but I couldn't see anything soft or inviting in her anymore. I saw a stranger, meticulously building a wall between us. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I had rehearsed this in my head 100 times, but the words felt clumsy, alien on my tongue. She turned around, her eyes wide. "About what?" The question was too quick, too defensive. I walked to the counter and picked up a ceramic mug, pretending to look for something. "About us. Everything feels different, Anna. Distant." She sighed, a slow, theatrical exhale. "Jake, we've been over this. You've been working so much. I have my shows. Life gets busy. It's normal. Is it normal to come home at 1 a.m. smelling like a stranger's cologne?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Her eyes hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. I was at an art show." I shook 100 hands. Someone must have been wearing some. Her anger was a shield, a wall she threw up to block me out. "And is it normal to hide your phone from me? To jump every time a notification comes in?" I pressed on, my own anger finally bubbling to the surface. "We used to talk about everything, Anna. Now I feel like I'm talking to a ghost. She set her mug down with a sharp clatter. You're being paranoid, Jake. You're inventing problems. I can't live like this, under constant suspicion. She turned and left the kitchen, the thud of her footsteps on the stairs a final, resounding note of her retreat. The argument was over, but nothing was resolved. Her words, her manufactured anger, they were a flimsy disguise for the truth. She didn't deny my accusations. She just attacked the one making them. I stood there for a long time, the silence stretching out between us like a vast, cold desert. The argument had confirmed what I had already known. This was no longer a matter of a simple misunderstanding. It was a lie. And I realized in that moment that I wouldn't get the truth from her. If I wanted to find it, I had to look for it myself. My love for her was a dying ember, but the need for answers was a raging fire. My decision was made in that quiet, empty space. I would follow her. I would watch and I would wait. I wouldn't be her husband anymore. I would be her shadow. The lie hung in the air between us like a physical object, a heavy and suffocating presence. My conversation with Anna had accomplished one thing, it had confirmed that she wasn't going to confess. The only way to find out the truth was to catch it myself. I wasn't just a husband anymore, I was a detective in my own life, and the suspect was my wife. The opportunity came 3 days later. It was a cold, blustery Tuesday, the kind of day Chicago is famous for. Gray clouds raced across the sky, and the wind bit at your skin. Anna told me she had to meet a client downtown at a coffee shop. A new commission, she said, with that same practiced smile. She wore a long, charcoal gray coat, and for the first time, I noticed how quickly she buttoned it up as she left, as if to hide something. I grabbed my keys and got into my car, pulling out of the garage a few minutes after she did. I kept a safe distance, making sure I could see her car but not be seen. The city traffic was a blessing and a curse. It made following her easy, but also made me feel like an insignificant part of a million other lives, each with its own secrets. She drove straight into the heart of the city, a place I knew well from my work, but had never truly seen. I followed her as she parked her car near a busy intersection, the kind of place where a person could disappear in a crowd. She walked quickly down a street lined with old brick buildings and modern glass facades, the wind whipping her hair around her face. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with a deep, consuming dread. This was no ordinary drive, this was the road to an answer I might not want. I parked my car and followed her on foot, keeping a half-block distance. She turned a corner and disappeared into a small, nondescript coffee shop. It was one of those trendy places with minimalist decor and the strong, bitter smell of roasted beans. I stood outside, my hands in my pockets, and watched through the steamy window. At first, I didn't see anything. She was just at the counter, ordering. I felt a fleeting, desperate hope that I was wrong, that this was just a simple meeting. But then, she turned, and my breath caught in my throat. She walked to a small table in the corner, where a man was already waiting. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a dark, short beard. He was smiling, a genuine, open smile that lit up his face. And Anna, she smiled back at him in a way I hadn't seen in months. The smile that reached her eyes. The smile that used to be only for me. They sat down and began talking, leaning in close to each other. He took her hands in his. It wasn't a business meeting. It was a date. And as they laughed, as they shared that intimate space, I knew. The crumbled note, the strange scent, the late nights, the distance, all the tiny pieces of the puzzle suddenly snapped together, forming a picture so clear and so painful that it felt like a physical blow. I stood there in the cold, rain-slicked street, watching my life unravel through a coffee shop window. The roar of the city, the cold wind, the sight of my wife with another man, it all blended into a single, overwhelming sound of a heart breaking. I felt nothing and everything at once. And in that moment, the questions about what to do next began to form, a new and terrible blueprint for a life I was now forced to build. I stood in the cold, a silent witness to my own demise. The man in the coffee shop was nothing and everything. A ghost and a villain. My mind, a place of order and blueprints, was now a chaotic mess of shattered glass and crumbling walls. The only thing I could think of, the only thing that felt real, was the cold, hollow space where my love for Anna used to be. I didn't go inside the coffee shop. I didn't cause a scene. I just turned and walked away. The Chicago wind, a constant companion, bit at my face, but I barely felt it. I got back in my car, drove home, and sat in the silent garage for a long time. I was no longer a man in love. I was a man betrayed. The blueprint of my life was gone. And in its place, a new, far darker plan began to form. When Anna came home later that evening, she was humming. She looked tired but content, the kind of contentment that comes from a day well spent. She didn't notice the coldness in my eyes. She didn't notice the way I flinched when she tried to hug me. She just smiled and asked about my day. It was productive, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I figured some things out. She didn't press. She went about her evening routine, the one we had built together, the one she had been so effortlessly deconstructing behind my back. She had a shower, ate a small dinner, and went to her studio to work. I watched her go, a quiet rage building inside me. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be a fight with screaming and tears. It would be an act of architecture, a careful demolition of her perfect little world. My first step was simple. I needed to know everything about him. I was an architect, I knew how to build a case, how to find the weak points in a structure. And he, whoever he was a crucial part of the new blueprint. I started with the crumpled piece of paper, the one I had found in the junk drawer. I took it out and carefully typed the numbers into my phone. A name appeared on the screen, a name I had never heard before, Mark. The city was a web of connections, and I was an expert at navigating them. With a little digging, I found his social media profiles, the same broad shoulders, the same beard I had seen in the coffee shop. I saw his life laid out in photos, a man who was an artist, a photographer, someone who loved the outdoors. In one of the photos, a little hidden in the background, was a painting I recognized. It was one of Anna's, a half-finished canvas that had been sitting in her studio for weeks. He wasn't just a random stranger. He was a part of her world. And now, I would become a part of his. The plan was clear, would use every tool at my disposal. My knowledge of the city, my professional connections, even the quiet normalcy of our life together. I would turn everything she cherished against her. I would build a trap so subtle, so perfectly designed, that she wouldn't even realize she was caught until it was too late. And then, I would stand back and watch the beautiful, deceptive life she had built crumble to dust. The plan was set in motion with a quiet, terrifying precision. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, not just for a divorce, but for something more. I found out where Mark worked, who his clients were, and even the gallery where his next big show was planned. My revenge would not be a single blow but a series of calculated strikes that would dismantle her life just as she had dismantled mine. The night I chose was a Friday, the end of a long week. Anna came home humming, as she always did now, her phone clutched in her hand. She put on a record, the gentle melody of an old jazz standard filling the room. It was our song, a cruel reminder of a time that was now gone forever. I watched her, and for a moment, I felt a pang of something akin to pity. But it quickly vanished, replaced by the cold, hard resolve of a man with nothing left to lose. "Anna," I said, my voice cutting through the music. She turned, a smile on her face that was still a stranger to me. "We need to talk. For real this time." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Jake, please. I'm tired. Can we just have one peaceful evening?" "No," I said, the word a stone dropping in a pond. Tonight, we get the truth. I walked to the living room and picked up a manila envelope I had left on the coffee table. I held it out to her. I know everything, Anna. About Mark. About the gallery shows you've been going to. About the promises you've been making to him. Her face went pale, the blood draining from it instantly. The smile, the hum, the very air around her, all of it collapsed. She stared at the envelope, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. What are you talking about? This, I said, my voice rising with a cold fury. I pulled out a stack of papers and spread them across the table. These are divorce papers. Filled out. Signed. Ready to go. They're not for you to sign. They're for me. I watched the realization dawn on her face. But that's not all. I pulled out a second document, a legal complaint. This is a lawsuit against Mark. He's been using my architectural designs for his photographs, and I've got the proof. My voice was a monotone, a flat, dead sound. It will ruin him, Anna. He'll lose his gallery, his reputation, everything. Her eyes filled with tears, and her composure finally shattered. You can't do this. He's a good person, Jake. He has nothing to do with us. He has everything to do with us, I said, my voice still flat. You made him a part of this. And now you get to watch as I tear down his career, brick by brick. Just like you tore down our life. She was sobbing now, her hands shaking as she picked up the papers. Why? Why would you do this? Because you wanted a new life, Anna, I said, my eyes fixed on hers. And I'm going to make sure that the one you get is with nothing and no one. The jazz music played on, a final, beautiful, and devastating soundtrack to the end of our world.